The Vilnius TV tower is visible from pretty much everywhere in Lithuania's capital city. It houses a museum and restaurant where diners can gaze out over the peaceful metropolis below. But in January 1991, 14 people died at the base of this tower as Soviet forces moved in to crush an independence protest that had gathered to protect the TV station inside. Lithuania was the first of the Baltic countries to wrench itself free from the Soviet Union in a series of uprisings throughout the late 80s and early 90s. 3 decades later, the country is a hotbed of anti-Putin activism as the painful memory of Russian domination lives on.
I use the analogy of West Berlin in Cold War times now.
It must be very clear pictures that it's a real war happening in Ukraine. It's not a special operation.
We must be ready to fight against an invasion. Well, and obviously it's only one country which has such plans and intentions, that's Russia.
It's a question of power, that's all. And we will meet with power if we will try to come here.
It's mid-February, almost 1 year since Vladimir Putin launched his war in Ukraine. We're in eastern Lithuania, 10 miles from the border with Belarus, on our way to meet members of the Iron Wolf Infantry Battalion, who are out on a training exercise.
Right now we're in the Pobrade training area, which is the central Lithuanian training area and also the biggest training area in Lithuania. We're going to one of the anti-armor ambush sites to see a training scenario of our infantry fighting vehicles fighting against our anti-tank platoon guys.
It's a cat and mouse game between these lumbering armoured troop-carrying vehicles and the nimble anti-tank units who lie waiting to deliver a devastating and demoralising surprise attack.
The infantry guys, they only have the route that they have to clear and see if it is passable for the upcoming troops to come, all the logistic troops. Ambush forces, the anti-tank guys, they only have like the boxes where they have to do the routes, so the platoon commander has to decide from the most probable road of advance. They have to set up ambushes.
Hit them in the nose, make them bleed and run away. So my mission is like that. I'm not like light infantry, I'm not shooting with my automatic rifle if I not need it. So I just hit them with jabs, make them bleed and run away.
As you've seen on the JLTVs, the flashing lamps, and also on the soldiers, you can see the mile systems, which is basically a system that allows us to create as real combat conditions as possible. When the soldier is shooting, the attachment sends the laser signal to the straps that all the soldiers wear. The system starts beeping if it's a near miss, and it goes on a continuous beep if you are shot.
The exercise is designed to hinder invading forces, wear them down, chip away at their numbers and slow their advance, making them pay for every step taken into Lithuanian territory.
If you're used to it, you can start feeling the vibrations in your ears of a sound when the heavy vehicles are coming, just like a sixth sense.
I want you to see a lot of chaos in our enemy structure, a lot of burning vehicles, and all my men run away.
The attack lasts just seconds, then the soldiers melt away into the forest to lie in wait for their next ambush.
We must always ready, always sharp and always angry. We defend our country from the last man standing. We fight our ground and we win in this ground.
After winning independence, Lithuania looked west to ensure their freedom. In 2004, they joined NATO and the EU. Now, the country hosts a multinational battle group led by the German armed forces. Berlin has announced they're ready to station a brigade of 4,000 permanent troops in Lithuania. Welcome news in Vilnius, where politicians have been raising the alarm about Russian aggression for many years.
We always were a society, a country which always said to Western allies, after even 2014, when after annexation of Crimea, after the occupation of Donbas region, saying give weapons to Ukraine, it will deter Russians. Deterrence is cheaper than defense. If you put here enough forces, national forces, NATO forces, you will deter. But it's not enough to have just formal membership. You need to have real capabilities, real plans, real force here, as much as possible on the line. If you want to make a small incursion in the Baltics, 30 kilometers from the Belarusian border, and Belarus is not a sovereign country already.
Warning time is short. Russians do many exercises close to our borders, so you never know what is the intent. If you have large concentration of forces around you, as Russians did several times around Ukraine, well, you never know when signal from Moscow will come, okay, let's do something aggressive. That's why for us, for Estonians, for Latvians, and for Poland, to have forces always ready and prepared, that's part of our existence. The only factor Russians respect is power, not weakness. We cannot tackle Russia by trying to persuade them. How we can try to tackle them is by showing strength.
We need at least brigade size unit here, as of 5,000-7,000 troops. We need regional plans of NATO, so it means the forces should be prepared to come as fast as possible, from 10 days to 30 days, also to come to help. But the Baltics is quite empty in air defense, if we talk about long ranges. So deployment of this system to the Baltics from NATO countries, even on rotational basis, would be a very good move, a very clever decision, and it will create reassurance for us, what we will be defending.
None more so than for the residents of a sleepy town on Lithuania's southern border. A freezing Arctic wind whips across the face of Lithuanian state border guard Gydas Sikorskas as he leads us out as close as it's possible to get to Russia. 200 meters away is the highly militarized Russian exclave of Kaliningrad, home to Russia's Baltic fleet and, according to Western intelligence, an arsenal of nuclear weapons. As we film on the bridge, Gydas warns us that the Russians almost certainly have cameras trained on us too. Below is the Niemen River, which flows from Belarus in the south through Lithuania in a meandering crescent moon shape on the way to its mouth in the Baltic Sea. It's the border between Russia and the West, where now only the birds above cross freely. Opposite are the rundown factories and apartment blocks of the Russian city of Svetsk. Since the war broke out, an unmistakable provocation has appeared on one of the buildings, leering back at the west across the water. The border used to be busy. Now it's quiet, tense. Those who cross must do so on foot. And a warm welcome isn't guaranteed in Lithuania.
There are different opinions, but I have nothing to speak about with those who support Russia. I just do not feel like being able to change their mind.
Kaliningrad is home to some 1 million people, and by a strange quirk of history and geography is separated from the rest of Russia by NATO countries. After World War II, the three bigwigs on the Allied side, Winston Churchill, Harry Truman and Joseph Stalin, redrew the map of Europe at a conference in Potsdam. It was here that Germany's most eastern territory of Königsberg became the Soviet Union's most western territory, Kaliningrad. The Russians booted out the Germans, repopulated it with Soviet citizens, renamed it after this guy, and set about exploiting its position in the, importantly, ice-free southern region of the Baltic Sea. During the Soviet era, it became a militarized zone, cut off completely from foreigners and accessible only by permit for Soviet citizens. As the USSR collapsed and the Baltic states declared independence, Kaliningrad's land corridor with Mother Russia went with them. Now, the territory is stranded, reliant on its neighbors to allow vital supplies through by train. All well and good when relations between Russia and the West were rosier, But since the war in Ukraine, sanctions have highlighted Kaliningrad's precarious position. In June 2022, Lithuania banned certain goods such as concrete and steel from transiting through the country to Kaliningrad. This infuriated Russia, with Moscow threatening harsh measures if what they described as a blockade wasn't lifted. A deal was eventually reached, but the incident threw light on how the region is both an asset and a vulnerability for Putin. If you were to stand on the opposite end of this bridge, you'd be on Russian soil, but you'd be 677 miles from Moscow, 290 miles from Minsk in Belarus, and you wouldn't be able to get to either without travelling through a NATO member state, or taking a long boat ride up the Baltic Sea. But the region also highlights a vulnerability in the alliance. Southeast of here is a Savalki Gap, a stretch of border between Lithuania and Poland, which is considered by many analysts to be NATO's weakest point. That's because it's the only land corridor available to reinforce the Baltic states. If they were invaded, a hostile country could take the gap, isolating the Baltics from NATO.
Clearly, it's an issue. Geography matters in military affairs. We are small countries, we have pretty small military comparing to Russia, and our strategy relies not just in place forces but on reinforcements as well. NATO is working out strategies how to deal with that, and obviously especially Finnish and Swedish accession to NATO would help us tremendously to bridge that gap, because now of course the only land connection we are having is with Poland, and it's vulnerable. But we need more opportunities to use land, sea and air connections to be able to bring reinforcements in time, even before crisis starts. So that's a strategy, to be prepared at home, to be ready to bring reinforcements, and of course to have precision guided weapons in the region, able to strike targets.
This precarious geopolitical position isn't lost on the residents here.
Uncertainty makes every man anxious. Everyone speaks about the Savalki corridor, and it starts just in 40 kilometers from here. They talk much about it, but Russia is right there.
If a 300 kg rocket flies over and hits Pravda, we're done. What kind of war is it? So I am waiting, and I am alert. When this happens, only running away could save one. If, God forbid, that happens, I would jump in my car and run away to Poland.
For 64-year-old Alfredus, the threat is very close to home. In fact, it's literally on his doorstep. His house is the last before the border, the first to find out if the worst were to happen.
If the Russians win, then they will attack the Baltics, Latvia, Estonia and Lithuania. If Kaliningrad starts shooting at us, nobody will be spared, yet the brunt would not be felt here. Should the Russians attack us or not attack us, there's not much we can do about it.
Although the border traffic has nosedived since the COVID pandemic and the war in Ukraine, there is a steady stream of people travelling back and forth across the bridge.
Some of the bridge crossers are Lithuanians, having relatives in Sovietsk. Some of the Lithuanian citizens work there, and the same applies to the Russians crossing the bridge into the Lithuanian side. For example, there are teachers who still work in Lithuanian schools in Sovietsk.
Alfredus steers clear of the Russian visitors.
Russians still come here, those with Lithuanian passports, but I do not talk to them. They do their business here, and I do mine. That's it.
People here believe their security hinges on the outcome of the war in Ukraine.
Nobody knows how things will be tomorrow. You live and do not know what awaits you.
From here, a long lens can capture the daily life of the people of Sovetsk. We watch as they go about their business in a city that feels much farther away than the 100 meters of river that separates us. Back in the capital, there's a message for Russia too. On a closed platform at Vilnius Central Station, a train from Moscow is arriving. On board are passengers travelling to Kaliningrad. They're about to come face to face with the brutal truth about Putin's war in Ukraine.
Every day the train from Moscow or St. Petersburg is stopping here in Vilnius for the 10-15 minutes, and the people has an opportunity to see this exhibition at the time when the train is standing on the platform. And the pictures are from the front line in the Ukraine. So the people from Russia can see the real pictures, not the propaganda, the close-ups, the wounds, and there is a question on the pictures also, and that question is asking that Putin today is killing peaceful people of Ukraine. Are you okay with that?
The photographs have been in place since March 2022, a month after Russian forces crossed the border into Ukraine.
Here's mostly Kiev and Mariupol. There is this picture from Mariupol, from the maternity hospital. It's, I think, well known already.
Many of the images are too graphic to show in this film.
It must be very clear pictures that it's a real war happening in Ukraine. It's not a special operation. It's real war, real killing people, the wounds. It must has no doubt what is going on. So they are quite, let's say, maybe sometimes shocking, but it's only this way they will believe that's the truth. That's not like some shooting of the movie or something like that.
On average, 100 trains a month pass through Lithuania, each with around 100 people on board. At other stations, passengers on these transit trains can access free Wi-Fi to browse the internet without the Kremlin's restrictions. But before they do, they're confronted with images of the war. But seeing and believing are two very different things.
You know, it's very hard to say what they think. You know, when you have 10 pictures of the exhibition you can see in 10 minutes, to compare with the months and years of I don't know, millions of hours when their brains are washed, we understand that we wouldn't change their mind with those pictures. But maybe they will stop for a minute to rethink that maybe it's something different than they receive every day in their media.
The photos have been placed directly at the height of the train windows on both sides of the track. For those inside, there's only one way to hide from the horror of the war, and many of them do. Others are defiant. In Russia, that hand gesture is akin to the Western middle finger.
I saw the people once. It was once from my 10, 12 times I've been here with a journalist, that only once the people was they're showing this one, they were sorry for what is happening, but it was only once.
Few are willing to show their faces to our camera, but near the front of the train we encountered a man staring openly at the photographs, his train carriage curtains wide open. The thick glass makes communication difficult and subject to interpretation.
There is a saying that people doesn't understand each other when they don't understand what the terminology means. You can think that he shows that it's peace, but maybe he thinks that it means his victory.
But one passenger made their thoughts crystal clear.
On that paper, it was written that Lithuanian people are killing peaceful people.